welcome back to this conversion. Now this is a VW Corrado with a later Mark IV engine in with a 6-seat gearbox. So I can't find any drive shafts that fit, so we're going to have to make our own. Yes, I'm going to have to make my own drive shafts, not completely from scratch. Now you can order them online at various lengths, but nothing really tallies. So I'm going to run through what I've actually put on my car. Yours might be slightly different if you're looking to make your own. So I'm going to run through the wishbones between narrow track Mark III, Mark II items and the wider track Mark IV, different track rod ends, hub variations. Once we got our suspension pretty much finalised, what I'm going to do is going to be able to measure the size of the drive shafts, because the Mark IV, this is Mark II item, is too long on both sides, so we're going to have to shorten them down. Now I've seen a few variations in size. Now if you want to skip through me going through hubs and wishbones and stuff, there's a link down in the description below for you to fast forward to the right spot. And while you're down there, just have a little look through some of those other little links. These are both Mark III style hubs. Don't be confused by both of them being 5 stud. This was originally a 4 stud, and I tried a different flange in there as I was working out what suspension components I could actually use for best results. And I'll talk you through why I've opted for a different version. So first of all, this is standard Mark III, Mark II style setup. The only differences between the Mark II and Mark III can be where this locates. Bottom ball joint here, which is a pinch style bolt, so that goes in, bolt goes through to pinch it to secure it. And if we compare it to the other one, which is known as the VR or the Suspension Plus, the fitting location and the way that this comes down and the angle is slightly different, but it's very marginal. And the biggest difference is the way that the bottom ball joint goes on. On this side, it hasn't got a pinch bolt. It's actually got a bolt that goes upright. This isn't the right one, and then bolts into there. Now the difference between these two and why I had to source some later VR style is that this mounted difference here. It looks very marginal, but that makes a massive amount of difference on the length of the wishbone, and to do with the roll centre and the theoretical lines of steering geometry and suspension setup. And when we compare the two together, you can sort of see the differences. That was mounted quite a bit lower, which we can see from this line as a reference point. How much lower it is. And the CV joints, quite noticeably different. So different design of the splines, different diameter of the splines. The splines on the Mark II style, Mark III style, just look heftier, but there's actually a greater surface area on the VR stroke Mark IV style design, which doesn't interchange into the central hub sections. This is the Mark IV version, which potentially I was going to use. The holes being different locations, similar sort of design. And this is the VR one. Again, looks very similar. And the main reason I was going to attempt to use the Mark IV version is because of the tilt. That's pretty much straight in my hand, so that's naturally allowing for the caster. See how much that's different, but it doesn't have the tilt. So the Mark IV is sided left and right. The VR version, one size fits both track rod ends. Mark 2 item, still listed on the later style Mark 3 wide track version. So I just opted for two of those new. There's the Mark 4 version, which is as good as being identical. It's the same size thread. Will actually bolt up to the inner track rod. But the difference is the pitch of this taper on those two. All the Mark 4 stuff is slightly bigger, so greater surface area on it. Theoretically be able to carry more loads than the evolution of the old stuff. And the track rods, this is part of the system that everybody gets confused about and what lengths you should go for. So this is a standard 4 stud early narrow track Mark 3 standard Mark 2 item. If we have a look at the length, we compare that to the Mark 4. Lengthwise, it's pretty much the same. We look at the inner section, it's greater diameter on the Mark 4 item. And the big difference is the rack is longer, or should we say wider. And if we compare standard narrow track onto the wide track, again, pitch of the bolts, same size on the inner. And then there's a noticeable length difference, massive increase there. About 30mm looking at it, may even be 40mm. I'll have to measure that, won't I now? Everything seems to be very much the same. So if we compare that with the wishbones, so I've overlaid one on top of the other, so slight deviation in the shape of the bow. There's neither here nor there. Pickup points are identical. Size of the bush appears to be identical. So pickup points for the anti-roll bar, slight difference. That being bolted from the front, that one being bolted basically through it. And here's what makes it special. Not only is it further out, the actual location or where the bottom of the ball joint would sit, it's also a little bit more forward, which is going to increase the caster angle. Let's have a look at the pickup points using the Mark II style ball joint. So pickup point would be in the region of there if you use the Mark IV or the VR style longer wishbones. Now the standard one, that's not going to squeeze in as easy, would be there. So there's a good bit of difference there. See, that's a closer. If you're to mix and match too many components, short and long, you'd end up getting a massive amount of bump steer, which is another theoretical thing which people find very hard to measure. If I get time, I may even measure the bump steer on this one, which I haven't done that for a long time. You can use it with wheel alignment machines. You can actually use it with lasers and bits of string, bits of card. Really sad, I know. Another thing I've noticed is the diameter of that. Now it's a while since I've had a Mark II, Mark III apart. The bolt hole is massively bigger on that one opposed to the Mark IV style. Both bolts are the same diameter, so there's potentially a lot more play in there if it's not tightened up, because it's able to kick out further. Even though that in the subframe it has got a little bit of a moon to help locate it. Maybe that's why. So there's a real mishmash of bits there. So I'm going to run through the bits that I've got, because it might be slightly different to yours, and that's going to make a difference to where the lengths are and where the different pickup points are. So wishbones, Mark IV, the suspension hubs, the track rod ends, the inner track rods and the lower ball joint are all off Mark III or VR Corrado, which is the wide track. Now I don't know whether the pickup points to the Corrado VR6 wishbones are slightly different to the Mark IV, but I'm sticking with the Mark IV ones anyway. So the most important bit is trying to work out what those lengths are. Now I had my camera too close so you could actually see the detail and some of the bits you've not seen. So I basically had me coilovers wound all the way down, actually hanging off so there was no suspension resistance on there, and put a jack underneath the end of the ball joint and actually ran it up and down so I could get different ride heights. So suspension in its highest point before it hits the bump stops, which you know is plausible if you were to go over a bump, right to the bottom of the droop, and then in all those positions basically locking the wheel left to right and turning it and just seeing what happens with the inner drive shaft. Because the easy way to have it stripped down, you can actually see what's going on. There's no actual drive shaft that's available that will mate onto the 6-speed box into a conversion of this sort, so I'm going to have to make my own, and luckily I've chopped some up. I can cut it roughly on that line, which is 10mm, to get a nice square cut. Going to wrap a bit of paper around it. This is where I find out I can't actually draw for toffee. I like toffee. Wouldn't win any on a drawing competition. Actually that bad. Fairly happy with that. The rest of the tube's hollow. They're a little messy, so I took them somewhere to get cleaned up for me. And he's come back with the goods. That looks a bit better, as does that. And he's machined it just right, so I'll be able to tap it in. That would be a bit of an interference fit as well. Right, let's see what we've got. So we've got the inner, which while measuring it I'm going to try and get that to be pretty much central, so there is a bit of movement in and out, which is fairly standard. You can see, but it may only have about 5mm each way, maybe a bit more actually. Don't think 10mm, but it must be close. And there's the CV joint. Now that should have a little spring clip to keep it located, because I'm going to be taking it on and off. I'm not going to fit the spring clip just yet. The two main things need to go on with those two components. That sits on there, that sits on there, and then that would go on there, so you'll be able to see. That's how it sits space wise. If I didn't have those, I'd probably really mess up the amount of the distance between those two, which could be quite critical. And the other side, which one's outer and inner now. that way around. So not only is the part number there, but you see a nice clean with the cowlings being over the top. So I'm going to fit that on there. If you don't have a drive shaft already cut, what you could do is actually put a piece of wood in between those two with a different variation, maybe like a little jubilee clip in there, just to sort of squeeze it round and try and work out your lengths and how much to play. The main thing is you want this pretty much in the middle. So let's bring it a little bit lower, which that could potentially be the ride height. As you can see, that's too far in. As it's starting to rain. Not that much off. By Jove, I think I've cracked it. Got the suspension fully raised up against the bump stop. That's the highest it's ever going to go. I've tried it, but both on full lock, both ways, just to see how it spins. I'm quite happy with it. Paying attention to where the cage, the outer bit of the cage locates. So that's at full travel up. Remember, we don't know where it's going to be sat ride height. So let's bring it a little bit lower, which that could potentially be the ride height. So it's still able to spin. Let me get it full lock one way, which is pretty much normal. Yeah. So that's what an inner CV joint has to do. No wonder they start clicking after a while. So that's on full lock. Full opposite lock. See, again, the cage hasn't gone too far in. It's not too much weight. Not too much pressure against the differential. That's fairly free to turn. And then that's at its lowest point. So I'm quite happy with the length of that one. That's straight ahead-ish. Don't worry about that banging, it's just the end court. And that's absolute full lock all the way out. I'd ideally prefer that to just be slightly more. I don't think I'm going to pop a ball there. But I've shortened these drive shafts. Took quite a lot of meat out of both sides of them. Probably got that much. Yeah, probably got that much. Wow, okay. My best measure. So I've just got back from a mate of mine who's welded up my drive shafts, which looks fairly good. I'm quite happy with that. Ended up tigging them together and then just running them in the lathe just to take off some of the weight, because one of them was a little bit off. I know roughly what it was on the dial gauge. You can sort of see that side. Now, interesting thing is, you ran it from the lathe side, and the side that we haven't touched looked like it had a bit of a bow in it, whereas it was running across, and even the powder coating wasn't touched, even though there was metal on the other section. So it wasn't 100% true. No idea why. One way to find out and get it built back up on the car. And to be honest, between the two of us, we're not sure how long it's going to last. It has filled in quite a lot, quite a heavy duty weld. As I've said, I'm not planning to run mega power out of it. So with it all built back up, it looks really nice. Now I wouldn't be able to do a lot of this stuff without my friends at IDM Engineering. It really helped me out with both machining the drive shaft to start off with, so I could actually get one side inside the other, still be a good interference fit and not be able to offset it. I could have probably done that alone, but sometimes you just need that little bit of a lathe just to get things to proper sort of diameters. But I've also covered everything in a couple of thin coats of black hammerite, just thin down a little bit, just to be able to give almost like a factory sort of finish, if not a little bit more rubberized than the factory finished. And again, the guys down at IDM really helped me out by welding up the drive shafts. To be fair, they didn't want them cut the way that I cut them, and if I was doing another set, I'd actually cut it more or less in the middle and then join it and sleeve it in the middle rather than at the ends. So if I do make another set, I'm definitely going to do it that way. Something like that I'm going to leave up to them the next time. Just give them the lengths, give them the shafts, chop them. I think it should last quite well, because I'm not going for big horsepower out of it. I'm going for miles per gallon. So as long as it's smooth, balanced, feeling good, I'm going to be happy. So if you found this useful, check down some of the links down in the description. Well, I've certainly hoped that this has helped you slightly, and it just feels great that I've got a better chance of getting this car back on the road, fully converted, with its ABS rings. As you can see, it's got Mark 4 ABS sensor fitted on here now. It's got the pickup rings. A lot of stuff tallies up between a Mark 3 and a Mark 4. It's quite surprising. Just the loom had to be converted, but I'll leave that in another ESP related video. I've already done one. I've got 2 or 3 more to do, and that's even before testing it. So if you've got any good ideas on how I should be testing the ESP, leave it in the description below. If it involves driving through Iceland on an ice lake, I'm not doing that. It does sound like fun, doesn't it? Give us a like. If you're not already a subscriber, subscribe, because this is going to be a really long project with lots of interesting stuff, and everything I'm doing is going to apply to any conversion on a Mark 1, Mark 2, Mark 3 derived chassis. Once again, thank you very much. Ta-da!